Lord Hamilton of Epsom thought of Animal Farm when he first read the bill. I actually thought of one of those dread brainstorming sessions. I could kind of hear some bright sparks saying, I know, let's go after a bunch of pale, stale and male aristocratic toffs in the Lords. That'll be popular with the masses. And it strikes me that this bill may have gone through a similar policy consultation as the let's go after those well-off pensioners taking advantage of our generous winter fuel allowance, or let's go after those greedy tax-dodging land-owning farmers, or those wealthy parents who can afford to send their special needs kids to posh private schools. It just feels a bit chippy and based on caricatures. At lunchtime, seeing that magnificent array of tractors driving past, it was a salutary lesson, and should be for the ministers, of what happens when lazy stereotype villains bump into material reality. In this instance, working farmers cheered on by the public as they demonstrated against government policy. The Minister for the Cabinet Office, Nick Thomas-Symonds, justified the particular bill because allegedly, if the second chamber does not reflect modern Britain, it can, if it does, then it can restore public trust in democratic institutions. And I want to ask, does the government really believe that all it will take to tackle profound political alienation and a yawning disconnect between millions of voters and mainstream institutions is to erase 88 hereditary peers? That just seems a tad complacent. I understand the rationale that in the 21st century it is outdated and indefensible for those born into certain families to decide on the laws of the land, and that's fair enough. But surely what's equally indefensible is that any of us with no mandate should be sitting here at all. OK, not because of parentage, but due to another arcane form of top-down patronage, as the peers have acknowledged. So I think we should be careful to avoid any self-regarding discussion here that imagines that the majority of us here are based on merit or on our virtues. It's equally egregious to appoint those infamous cronies, donors, former MPs, appointed after many were rejected by the electorate, and all the odds and sods that have been put here based on some West Prime Ministerial whim, and yes, that includes me. Apology to the great and the good, by the way, and the bishops, because I know that you're all blameless, but nonetheless, all of us, however virtuous, are unelected, and we represent an affront to democracy. I say this not to be churlish. Many here are brilliant, hard-working scrutineers. There's an abundance of expert knowledge, plenty of rhetorical and analytical accomplishment, often lacking from the other place, and regardless, it's hard to argue, but regardless of all of that, it's hard to argue we're the epitome of democracy. So I'm still bemused that the government has narrowed the scope of reform to hereditary peers only. That just seems like such a waste of parliamentary time and energy. For goodness sake, if you're going to do constitutional reform, do it with conviction and gusto. We should not be gaslit into accepting that this bitty, piecemeal approach is anywhere near the constitutional shake-up that was promised. I appreciate that to be radical would require courage, a grown-up debate in both chambers, a national conversation about how Parliament should enact the will of the people via lawmaking, and would encounter problems because, yes, an elected upper chamber would be a challenge to the primacy of the Commons, as was pointed out in the excellent maiden speech by the noble Lord Brady of Altrincham. But maybe looking at the Lords is the wrong focus. When this chamber is lauded for amending poorly drafted laws, spotting unintended consequences, having the time to scrutinise legislation properly, and so on, after laws being rushed through the other place, surely our focus should be a proper democratic solution, and that is to bolster the time available and scrutinising powers of the Commons, to focus on them, to improve the quality of the laws drafted. In other words, to abolish this second chamber and adopt a truly unicameral model, and improving and upskilling the Commons, and concentrating on improving the most important relationship, which is not between two houses, but between the elected and the electorate. Finally, I do believe we have a problem of elitism at present in the UK. But in 2024, the culprits are not the gentry lording it over the public. There are new political and cultural overlords who look down on ordinary people, who think they know best about everything from the public's consumer habits to the virtues of mass migration in defiance of popular disquiet. Forget those to-the-manner-born types correcting P's and Q's of the hoi polloi. Beware instead the patronising diversity and inclusion commissars who police everyday words and pronouns on pain of cancellation and who, without irony, lecture others to check your privilege. Entitlement and elitism are alive and kicking. The hereditary principle is the least of democracy's problems, and by the way, victory to the farmers. And I just wanted to say to Baroness Quinn, in terms of her valedictory speech, if anything was proof that 80 is an arbitrary, mad and ageist line to cut off somebody in their prime and have a wonderful retirement in Newcastle, which I love, then she was a perfect example of it.